Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. My name is Key Lawson. I am a board member at Women Helping Women. I am so grateful to all of you for spending some of your morning with us to explore this critically important topic. We wouldn't be here without the incredible generosity of our sponsors, Francie and John Pepper, the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, Duke Energy, Fifth Third Bank, TAF, Thompson Hine, Adam Gelter, and one anonymous donor. Thank you for stepping up for our mission and community when things have been so difficult this year. Want to give a brief teaser after a short video and excellent discussion with our panelists. We will be making an ask of you to invest in the incredible work of Women Helping Women. At any point during the event, you can donate by texting WHW Agenda to 41444 or by giving to our website. Thank you so much. The mission of Women Helping Women is so critically important right now. The work they are doing is literally saving lives. While this year keeps throwing roadblocks and step backs, Women Helping Women hasn't faltered or stopped. They have expanded services and continue to adapt to serve the survivors of our community. And I can attest to that. They have done it with urgency, compassion, and care. I would like to introduce you to the incredible leader of this agency, Kristen Smith Shrimplin, President and CEO of Women Helping Women.
Thank you so much, Key. I just want to start this morning off by saying thank you, everyone, for showing up. I know Zoom calls are hard and that you all have competing needs for your time. In fact, in 2020, some of the biggest commodities besides health and safety are time and focus. So thank you for being here. And I want to say thank you to Women Helping Women advocates and staff in particular, because you never give up. The late Senator John Lewis was fond of saying, be kind, be particular, make it plain, make it simple. Women Helping Women team, you are kind. You are particular about ensuring response to survivors. You make safety options understood in plain ways because you know that a mom in trauma at 3 a.m. when her child is crying next to her, she cannot process easily. And you make it simple when the agency asks you time and time again to work extra long hours, and you always show up. So thank you. And to level set for all of us here, I want to say Women Helping Women does not have all the answers, but we are asking you to join us in setting, planning, and executing an agenda about empowerment, an agenda about equity, an agenda that places survivors in the center, an agenda that brings cross sectors together to say that gender-based violence is not a niche issue. It is a critical economic and human rights public health crisis. An agenda that asserts that deadly trend that we are on is unacceptable. A community-wide stake in the ground survivor agenda. Because we have to. Violence keeps spiking. For 8 straight months, we are battling an unrelenting surge of survivors and less structural support in our communities. Our 24-hour hotline is spiking 53%. 55% of divert survivors, when we go on scene, they're experiencing strangulation, and 50% of them are being threatened to be killed by their abuser. Domestic violence is deadly. Look at what's happening in Ohio right now. During COVID, we have a 35% spike in domestic violence fatalities. So far, just this year in the city of Cincinnati alone, 7 women have been murdered by individuals who claim to love and honor them. Data suggests that we are on track for the deadliest year for women in Cincinnati in more than 20 years. And although gender-based violence happens with all social demographics, let's be clear. Black women are disproportionately experiencing gender-based violence over and over again. Why? The short answer, structural racism and the powerful intersection of misogyny. Systems barriers are a mile high and they are built solid with generations and generations of bricks and mortar of racism and oppression. These barriers are strengthened each time a new, inequitable agenda is enacted that dismantles, deregulates, and defunds survivor services, essentially redlining survivors even deeper into the margins. So let's unpack these statements a little. Consider the Violence Against Women's Act, otherwise known as VAWA. It was established in 1994, been around a long time, typically a bipartisan supported law that enacts policies and funding to victim crime or victim service agencies like ours. It's a great piece of legislation. Reauthorization has always been routine until 2018, when VAWA became a political bargaining chip for bigger and larger political battles. What's the result? Unfortunately, since February of 2019, this critical legislation has been expired. 87 weeks. A law called the Violence Against Women's Act is currently dead because the US Senate leadership has kept VAWA off the floor. So how is that system working for survivors? 87 weeks. Survivors ousted to the margins. Let's look at Title IX. Title IX is a civil rights law that protects our students, K through 12 and on campuses, from discrimination based on sex. And this is important, this includes sexual assault and rape. It's an important law. But what began as some controversial views on the national landscape about Title IX have now become formal regulations. 2020 update, May 7th. This year, the US Department of Education rolled back years of civil rights protections for student survivors. What did they do instead? Well, they increased protections for students accused of sexual misconduct, and then they actually reduced liability for colleges where actual findings of sexual misconduct, like rape, occurred. So how is that system working for survivors? Young student survivors ousted to the margins. Finally, let's talk about the Federal Victims of Crime Act, better known as VOCA. VOCA is a really great law that basically takes money from criminals and allocates it to victim service agencies. Then that money is earmarked to domestic violence, sexual violence, and child abuse agencies. Great law. But last year, we rang this alarm bell very loudly that the funding bucket was losing money by the millions. I mean, it's shocking. During the Obama administration, we have literally gone from about $6.6 billion in that revenue bucket to currently, under this administration in 2020, there is $173 million. Shocking. 2020 update. Ohio was just massively cut with its VOCA allocation. And 3 weeks ago, we at Women Helping Women just found out with our VOCA grant, we were cut 36%. That's an immediate loss of over $323,000. All of our VOCA money goes directly to serving survivors. So How can we believe that all of these systems are working for survivors? They aren't. Survivors are being ousted to the margins, and it's unacceptable. So that's why the time is now. The time is now to place survivors back into the center. The time is now for a survivor agenda. It's time to secure safety, health, responsiveness, protections, healing through empowerment and equity. There can be no pause button. This is a human rights issue. This is an economic issue, an education issue, an healthcare issue, a workplace issue. In real talk, this is an issue for you and for me and for all of those that we love. So yes, let's be kind. Let's be particular. Let's make it plain. Let's make it simple. And it gets no simpler than this. If you have an idea, let us know. We'll show up, we'll listen, and we'll collaborate with you. We'll workshop it out. And then maybe, just maybe, before we know it, when we come back together 1 year from now at the 5th annual corporate event, we'll celebrate as we report out on what we did, all of us, for a survivor agenda. It's time to put them back into the center. Thank you for showing up today.
So when I was a little boy, I seen abuse. The police would come to my home all the time. I remember the flashing lights and loud sirens in the middle of the night. When I was a little boy, Women Helping Women was there for my family by supporting us through the Hamilton County court system. My childhood trauma and experience instilled in me a deep need to help others. I am now the DIVERT director. I have the opportunity to make change. When I was a kid, this opportunity was not possible. It's possible now.
In 2017 alone, 12 women in Hamilton County were killed by domestic violence. I was someone's mother. I was someone's sister, someone's best friend, their coworker, their neighbor, their auntie, someone's granddaughter. And then behind each of those lives lost, there's easily an additional 100 people impacted. We at Women Helping Women know that we don't have to accept that as normal. So much community loss and pain is unacceptable to us. So we did something about it. In 2018, we launched the Domestic Violence Enhancement Response Team, better known as DIVERT. In this program, when the police receive a 911 call for domestic violence, they assess the crime scene for safety, and then they call us. When a survivor needs us the most, we bring our expert team to them. So while the police focus on the abuser, our advocates provide trauma-informed care and support to survivors.
Every day I work hard, and I'm gonna continue to work hard to make sure that every child and every mother has every opportunity that we can give them. I knew as a child, and in today's world, that it's my job to make an impact, to impact those neighborhoods that's forgot about, to impact those survivors and those children that is forgot about. It's my job. And it's your job to continue to help us meet those goals, set those expectations, and to be successful at making sure that every survivor has that opportunity.
Our vision is to expand response to every neighborhood in Hamilton County. Since launching in 2018, Divert has served thousands of survivors, but we know that's only about 15% of all the survivors who could use our services in a given year in Hamilton County. We're ready and able to expand our impact and reach more survivors through this program, but we need more investment to make it possible. Divert works, and we know that our mission may be ambitious, but we believe it is possible. Not one more homicide, not one more act of violence that goes on unanswered.
So thank you, everyone. While we recognize that Divert, and that's the program you just saw with the video, is one piece of the puzzle, we need a lot more pieces to come together from cross-sector support to really address what is happening in our region with this converging storm, right? With COVID, with structural racism, and with gender-based violence. And so that's why we really wanted to reach out to some amazing leaders in our region to assess from their leadership lens, how do we proceed forward? And how do we come up with creative solutions? So it is my pleasure to introduce our three panelists. First, we have Stephanie Smith. She is the Senior Vice President and Chief Inclusion Diversity Officer at Fifth Third. Stephanie brings incredible passion and thoughtfulness to this conversation every day. And she works to make her company at Fifth Third and her community a more equitable place for all of us. And I can say that her leadership and vision have made a difference, not just for this region, but also for me personally. It's been a joy to get to know her, and she's a fellow classmate of Leadership Cincinnati 43. Next, I would like to introduce Eddie Cohen, the President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Southwestern Ohio. I'm so glad Eddie is now in Cincinnati. What an incredible asset to have in our community. And in his short time so far at the Urban League, he has really shown us what cross-sector collaboration can truly accomplish. Having the Urban League as a community partner has really helped Women Helping Women and so many other groups in our region to be more equipped to think holistically about the challenges that we have to take on and face as a community. Finally, we have Carl Preissner, the HR Director for Global Diversity and Inclusion at Procter & Gamble. Carl brings incredible perspective on what big organizational change can and should look like, how to integrate equity into all layers of a corporate setting, and how we can all leverage our own power to make a difference on the things we care about. So thank you so much to all the panelists for joining us today. Let's get right to it and dig in and looking at this intersection between COVID, structural racism, and gender-based violence. I'm going to direct a question to each of the panelists, and we'll get to hear their thoughts and responses to that, and then we'll wrap up with some group questions. So this first question goes to Eddie. Eddie, major investments and projects are critical for big community change, but we know that community organizing and grassroots activism are really the engines behind so much of that change. Can you speak to us how grassroots and community organizing around the COVID epidemic in our region has been driven under the Urban League's leadership work and your leadership lens?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. One, just honored to be here and in partnership with Women Helping Women. You're one of the first leaders that I met when I moved here over a year ago. So just really, really honored to be here. we'll talk a little bit about just this moment that we're living in. And we always talk about the need for structural flexibility when you think about community organizing. We say something that's a little bit uncomfortable, but we know as a civil rights organization and as an organization that does programming, there is a need for unrest. We have had in our building non-public conversations with the defund the police movement and police organizations, right, with no cameras. We believe that that ugliness is a part of the process. And one of the things we've learned, we've been around, for those who don't know, the Urban League for over 70 years. We've served over 1 million African Americans. Is when people disagree with something or they're uncomfortable, whether it's talking about COVID disparities or race, there's three things that happen. You know, I disagree with what you're doing, right? You should not be protesting. I disagree with how you are doing it, that it must be peaceful, it must be done in a particular way. Um, and it is irresponsible for me as a leader to say, burn the city down, but it is equally responsible for me to pretend if there were not cameras and we were not in this digital age, that people will get procedural justice. It just doesn't exist in some disparities. And then three, it's who is doing it, right? So why are you doing it? I have to remind people in Cincinnati, when we talk about the collaborative agreement in 2001, that happened because of civil unrest and because of a lawsuit. So we have been engaging in incredibly aggressive strategies with grassroots organizations, with community. The first is we've been doing three things: is to educate, to invest, and to influence. Every talk that we say we do these three things. What do we mean by educate? There is a radical unlearning and learning that we need to do. My first job was at an organization called Equal Justice Initiative. Had a boss that always talked about truth and reconciliation, right? It is easy to go to reconciliation, without truth telling, right? Is what do I need to do? What do I need to set aside in my particular company? What statement do I need to put out? But it's really hard to talk about the truth, the things that are happening with women during COVID, the things that are happening historically in this country. We have not done what Germany has done around banning swastikas, the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. We've not done that. So even the Black Lives Matter mural that we organized 60 Black artists to paint in front of City Hall, that was very intentional, that there was education a part of that project. And I can't tell you the number of people who have reached out to us from Indiana to Northern Kentucky to say, I brought my children down to look at what was contained in that letter. So it's just radically educating people. Even Netflix has a Black Lives Matter series where people can get educated in secret. The second is just investing. And we say investing in two ways. One is looking at how we spend our individual dollars. We launched the Buy Black campaign, and there's a lot of misunderstanding of why, when violence happens, people talk about buying Black. What does that have to do? How does that keep communities safe? And I think that people understand that Black economics, or economics in general, has a strong relationship with social change. And I use Mississippi as an example. Mississippi did not come to a moral epiphany and say we want to change our Confederate flag. They were pressured economically to change. The same thing with the Washington football team. So we know that we've had some false starts. People know about the Tulsa riots, when there was this concept of Black wealth that was literally sabotage. So we've launched sort of a Black spending campaign, and that's not just for Black folks, right? The same thing with women-owned businesses. And then the second part of that invest is through philanthropy. There's a spectrum of philanthropy, and I used to be a funder before I did this work. There's a safe spectrum that we invest in, which is things like reading books to toddlers, which is very necessary. We know about the word gap. And then there's another spectrum that is uncomfortable. If you look at the opposite end, that's gender-based bias, that's racism, that's human trafficking, these things that are uncomfortable. And we need to really push ourselves up that scale, up that continuum, and support organizations like Women Helping Women, who are proximate to people who are experiencing pain. And if they don't have the capacity, if they're too small, invest in their capacity to grow bigger and to do it more. You already know that they have high outcomes. So we really have to think about our investments. And then lastly, we've been saying, use your influence. And what we mean by influence is your individual social capital. Even the Urban League as an organization, we realize that we have incredible social capital. And we need to use that as it applies to gender-based violence and race. Uh, the, the, the simplest analogy that I can think of is if 25% of male CEOs said in this country today that we want to eradicate the gender pay equity gap, we may see more progress in 1 year than we've seen over the past 100. Now, that does not mean that men replace women in the movement. What it means is that you can be imperfect and still use your social capital to drive change. When we saw hundreds of corporations say that Black Lives Matter, it wasn't because they woke up and said, let's put out a statement. It's because there was some opinion leader, organizations like Fifth Third, Procter and Gamble that are here that led, and it gave tacit approval for other organizations to do the same thing. So we've really been just doing that, and really looking at, if someone wants to organize, how can we use our expertise, our 70+ workforce between here and Dayton to help them empower themselves, to work alongside with them to elevate those voices.
There's so much to unpack right there. And when you were really talking about, you mentioned procedural justice, truth and reconciliation. Before you can get anywhere near to reconciliation, you've got to get to the truth, and really unpacking through, you got to educate, invest, and influence. And that is what we are seeing, the impact that is happening through the Urban League. Thank you for your response to that question. Stephanie, I'm going to pivot to you now. You've always been a proven leader in our region, and Fifth Third has really shown up in the way it is really driving impact in our community, and investing in time, resources, and people to truly improve the lives of Cincinnatians. This is not a transactional strategy, right? This is relational. So what do you see as the key role that financial institutions can play in serving individuals in our community, as we're combating, this intersection of pandemics?
First, I want to start off and agree with Eddie that really pleased and honored to be asked to speak today. The work that Women Helping Women has been doing historically, and certainly the work that you're doing now and that needs to be done at a greater capacity, is unbelievably meaningful to the invisible survivors. And I say invisible because domestic violence, like racism, is a very challenging discussion, and we tend to avoid challenging discussions. But I want to go to what you're saying in terms of relationship, because relationship matters. People partner with, collaborate with people they know, like, and trust. And one of the things that I've shared here internally with our employees, executives, and leaders is that, quite honestly, as a financial institution, we're used to having challenging conversations. I mean, when you think about the great financial crisis in 2008, 9, 10, that's all we were having were challenging conversations. We're a financial institution. We have to invest in businesses, or we have to sometimes say no when the circumstances and environment are not conducive for the ongoing operations of the company. And so we constantly talk to our business owners about strategies where they can continue to be an ongoing concern. And certainly in this current environment, you all know that we participated in the PPP loan process. Just to give you an idea of the capacity of our community, Fifth Third on average did 350 small business loans per year, 250 to 400. Within a matter of weeks, Fifth Third did over 44,000 loans for $5.4 billion. And we are proud to say that 23% of those loans went to businesses, small businesses with less than $1 million, an average loan amount of $150,000. So the beginning of talking about domestic violence is talking about financial freedom and equity. You can't separate one from another. When I look at the information that you provided to Fifth Third, Kristen, and saw that 67% Black women being impacted, 90% of those making less than $10,000 a year, that says it all. You can't escape from any situation when you don't have cab money, bus money, hotel money, grocery money. You're not going to get very far. So there is a significant role for financial institutions to play around equity, around pay equity. So I'll share with you some things that Fifth Third has done, which I believe are very meaningful. One of the things we've been doing internally is a pay equity review since 2011. We've done that internally. We've had an objective third party come in 2019 to validate our processes. And then indeed, Fifth Third had a very, very small gap from a pay equity perspective that we're closing. In 2018, you saw us, in 2016, our minimum wage was $12 an hour. By 2018, you saw us increase that minimum wage by 50% to $18 an hour. When you add our other benefits in, the average salary at Fifth Third Bank with benefits is almost $40,000 a year. That's meaningful in terms of helping marginalized families get back on their feet. So you don't have to be a financial center manager. You don't have to be a senior vice president. You can get back on your feet at the lowest level now at Fifth Third as a teller. We've had some of our tellers, Kim Hallbauer, started at the bank about 25 plus years ago as a teller. She's a regional president now in our Kentucky affiliate. So where you start is not necessarily where you finish. One of the other things I'm very proud of that we've done is that when the city council for Cincinnati came out with the salary history pay ban, which means that you can no longer, as a corporation and as an employer in this region, ask for historic W-2 income, which with women in general being 74 to 75 cents on the dollar of a man, and Black women being 67 cents, 65 to 67 cents. You can see if you continue to provide your historic salary, that gap stays. You will never close that gap. So by not having to disclose that, not only in Cincinnati, Fifth Third rolled this across our entire footprint, all 13 states. Now we are no longer collecting W-2 information. You can come to us and say what you believe the role should pay fairly. And we take that to the market and we confirm. I think those three things are our commitment to women and to minorities, because we are the ones that are suffering from those historic, traditional ways of looking at pay, traditional ways of entering, where we're now looking at officer titles. We're looking at everything and saying, where is unconscious bias in our processes? Where are we supporting systems unconsciously? I will say that for the first time in Fifth Third's 160 plus year history, we've rolled out unconscious bias across the enterprise. And of our almost 2,000 respondents, all of our employees, mostly, I would say about 98%, really appreciate the tools and resources we put out on our website, externally and internally, and from allyship to advocacy. How do we support people who are on the margins? So I think as it relates to corporate America, there is lots that we can do. We live in the space of financial literacy. Our community and economic development group, headed by Bynum Elliott, who is our chief enterprise officer, we do financial literacy all the time with not-for-profit organizations, helping families, women, and their children understand what the banking process looks like. So there is obviously more work to do. We are wrapping up our $32 billion commitment, which was our 5-year investment in mortgages and low to moderate income communities. you're going to find out that we more than achieved our goals there, but there's more work, Kristen, like you've indicated, that needs to be done. And we stand in the position to partner with you, to link arms with you, because as our community rises, we all rise. So we're here today, I'm here today on behalf of Fifth Third Bank to partner with Women Helping Women to help your survivors rise.
Whoa, like this is why I made the reach out to ask and really harvest the thought capital and the vision of the leaders that you're seeing on the panel today. Stephanie, you are absolutely right. You cannot separate financial equity and safety. When people do not have that equity, they are not safe, right? They're pushed to the margins, and we cannot have a community of people pushed to the margins. And that because there is no rising together, right? And when you say that Fifth Third is about relations, absolutely. The corporation demonstrates that. You said the 13-state footprint. And Women Helping Women, I know the Urban League and so many other, those of us who are on the front lines are so grateful. And we will rise with you, we will work with you. And thank you so much for understanding where you start is not where you finish. We see that all the time with the survivors we serve. They may start off as victims, go to survivors, but the vision is how can we walk the path to getting to thriving? That's what equity truly looks like. Thank you. Okay, Carl, I'm going to pivot to you before I come to a group question for everyone. So P&G obviously is a recognized global leader, and you've been very vocal in the need for men to speak up against gender inequities and racial inequities and the role of white people to speak out against racism. What do you see as the role of white folks, white allies, or if that word's too problematic, to be their actions in the corporate setting? Essentially, what is the role of white people to stand up and demonstrate actions for racial justice?
Yeah, thank you, Kristen, and again, thank you for inviting me. And the challenge of going last is I've been impressed by what's already come before, so I appreciate the chance to speak on this important topic as well as with Stephanie, you and Eddie as well. It's an important question, and I think for some of the obvious reasons, but I suppose the simple answer, right, is lead. What does lead mean, and why? So when I say lead, I think there is lead inward, and there's a lead outward. The leading inward is a personal journey that includes some things like exploring our role in it. I mean, the fundamental premise of a fundamental flaw or myth that is often held about racism, sexism, many of these challenges, all these challenges really, is that somehow these are things that are just about the victim, just about the survivor, just about the outsider. It couldn't be further from the truth. These things are very much about, and I would say are led by the insider. It is the people who stand with the most power and the most privilege who have the ability, the responsibility to bring about change. We can't leave it to those least among us with least power to somehow rescue all of us. And so part of leading inward is exploring our own role in this, where we sit in this as a white person, exploring what it means to be white in America. I remember one of the Beyonce had once said something when she was giving Colin Kaepernick Award that in America, being white is sometimes so confused with the country itself that people can think when you're protesting racism, you're protesting America. And I'll admit I didn't totally get that at the time. But then when I started to see some of the things that happened this summer, I go, wow, yeah, right. There really are we have these real problematic views of what it means to be white that are mixed up with all types of things that are getting in the way of actually being human, of being partners, of realizing our aspirations. So a core part of learning for any leader and for white leaders that come to race is exploring what that means for us, what it means for what we get to pay attention to, what it means for who gets credibility, who doesn't, what it means for which questions get focused on, and then exploring where we benefit from that and where we have some cost. And the part about cost, the part about learning about not just where we stand to benefit about cost is, I think, another key part of learning and critical need for the insiders in race white is to find our own self-interest in this, right? If we're going to reach our aspirations for equity, equality, for justice, it's going to take a lot more work. To state the obvious, we're nowhere close to be there. We need people and leaders who are in it and are continuing their own journey over time, not just this summer because we saw a lot of activity and we, the attention was high, but this winter, next summer, 10 years from now. And that means finding our own self-interest. For me, if someone were to say, why am I interested? I've spent time exploring both my personal interest, social interest, even, what is the business case for it, all those things. So another core part of the responsibility of a leader is finding out what's my stake in this, what's going to keep me engaged in this, so that I don't buy into the myths that somehow this is just about somebody else. I see that I stand to benefit. Talking about race, but in the case of gender, men are not oppressed by gender inequality, but they do face costs. And one of the challenges we have in how we deal with those oftentimes is that those don't often get talked about. So one of the things, part of leadership can be in audiences where I have access, in white audiences, I can call questions about that. We can explore together, myself and other white leaders, myself and other men, myself and other corporate leaders, what are the costs we face as men to men of the persistence of gender equality, of white men, of white people to white people, of the persistence of racial inequality, and to call the conversation. So I'd say part of leadership is really our own inward journey, being curious, being humble. There's a great mentor of mine, his name Wade Davis. He's over at Netflix now, and he said part of the key journey of that is really he always starts his conversations with two challenges really. One is, can I let go of the need to be right? Sorry, I guess that's just our current world. But he says, can I let go of the need to be right? And can I let go of the need to be a good person as I begin this exploration? And really what that's about, what those two things are about, are necessary premises to learn, right? Because it's very difficult, particularly in a context where there's plenty of pressure, external, internal, of who's wrong and who's bad and who's good. And those can get in the way of progress sometimes. So letting go of the need to be right means that I'm open, that I've got something to learn, and I may be wrong. I may be, and I acknowledge I'm probably participating in ways I don't know. And can I let go of the need to be a good person? That's often a barrier to learning. Instead, can I replace it with a recognition that I'm human? And can I use that to explore my humanity and my role in this? So I'll put all that in the bucket of, those questions are exploring the inward journey. The outward journey is probably what you hear a lot about. It really for leaders, particularly in race, in the corporate environment, but also gender, also people with disabilities, all of our degrees of difference. It could be level bias, it could be function bias. It is really to be vocal, to be visible, to inside the office, to be calling the conversation, right? Because we have, as the insider, as a white male, I know, whether I want it or not, that if I say, you know what, I think we need to explore what's going on with, I see some racial bias, I see some gender bias, unintentional, not unintentional, I see it operating, and I think it's getting in the way, and I think we need to figure out how we're working on it. If I say something like that, it lands differently than if a woman of color, a man of color, or someone else is going to say. And that's a, we use the term, that's a privilege. And I may or may not want to have that, but the point is, it doesn't matter. I didn't earn it. And so so my job is now to find out how to use those things honorably, use them for good, use them for the benefit of our collective experience. And knowing that when I do that, we all benefit. This is not some, to use the phrase, the white knight or something like that, right? No, I'm not coming to fix someone else's problem. I am coming to participate and partner in a dynamic we share in, which I play a very critical role in, and to figure out and explore how I can help shift that for my benefit, for your benefit, for our benefit together. So calling the conversation, being visible, explaining why, and talking about why it matters to me, why, and being open about that, and also being open about where my challenges are, where I still have questions. One of the P&G is spending a tremendous amount of time over the last 4 years in conversations with men on gender equity and gender equality. And if I look back on how that started, which is a powerful, transformative piece of work in our company, we learned from another company. And the story we first participated, a group of 10 of us sat in on a conversation at Northrop Grumman. And the reason Northrop Grumman was having that conversation, when I found out a little bit more about that story, was one leader in Northrop Grumman, one male, one who was white, who really had begun to learn some experiences himself about how he was participating, who he was listening to in meetings, who he wasn't. And he just came back to his team and he just started saying, look, I don't have all the answers. I just want to share some things I'm learning and thinking about. And he shared those, and in his team of 10, he told me this story one time. He said, I had 10 people. I went and I shared the conversation. He goes, 7 people in that conversation immediately, you could see them shut down. They said, this is bullshit. Excuse me. This is not, this is nonsense. We don't need to spend time on it. He says, there's only 3 guys after that conversation that came up to me and said, hey, you said something. I want to have that conversation. Point was, he led, he made it visible. He was humble. And it found 3 people, and those 3 people talked to 3 more people. And next thing you know, Northrop Grumman is engaged, then P&G is engaged. So forgive me, I've gone longer than I should have, but I think being visible, being vocal, having our own plan, and all of this is making, I hope it's come through that the key part of being an insider is really challenging the premise that somehow this is about someone else, is really calling the conversation and bringing to the table our role, our relationship to this, and being open to learning that we need to understand more of what that is, because part of being an insider is we don't get to see, we're the fish in the water many times. So there's some things we may need to hear from other people and learn about that and partner. And that's the journey of the leader. So it's true in a corporate world. It's also true in personal life. It's true in a community life. And I think fundamentally that's what white people need to do. We're going to be a key part, if not the key part of the change that gets us to our aspirations.
Thank you so much for that, Carl. It really, resonated. You're talking about in order to lead and unpack white privilege and the 402 years of white privilege and supremacy. Before we can lead as white people outward, right? We got to do that work inward. And preferably we do that inward with ourselves and perhaps with our white people instead of going to other people to educate us on the problems we set up and created. And you talked about that this is long-term, right? So this is not police brutality and racial injustice didn't just happen on May 25th, May 26th of this year, right? And so this is very much about a marathon and not a sprint, and about proximity and not shying away from that when we white people may become uncomfortable, right? That's a privilege piece. And I do just want to pivot real quick because I have like 3 minutes before our board chair comes on, but maybe, and this may be a little stacking the deck, if you all could give me 1 sentence response. This year in February, when we had Women Helping Women's first board meeting, I gave them a poem to set our mindset, right? It's a poem that everyone knows. It's very short. It's from Langston Hughes. It's called Harlem. And in that, he's really examining, is a dream deferred, right? And so he starts by asking about dreams deferred. Does it dry up like a raisin in a sun? And he ends it with, or does it explode? We've had a lot of statistics. We've had a lot of talk. Very well aware. Survivors' dreams have absolutely been deferred. COVID is deferring people's dreams, as is racism and intersection. Stephanie, what's your dream? If we had all the power in the world, what's your dream for our region?
You know, I think that it has to be aligned with the dream of Martin Luther King, that every child, every little Black boy, every little Black girl, every Latinx boy, every Latinx girl, every LGBTQ plus boy, girl, every little white boy, white girl, could walk hand in hand through our communities, unjudged, undefined, and not abused. That is the American dream. That is why immigrants from all over the world came to this country, bore hardship, crossing turbulent seas, to come to a land of hope and dreams. These dreams are under attack. Some hopes are being dashed, but the foundation must hold. That we know, we hold it self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights. This must be the Statue of Liberty and Freedom must stand. So each and every one of us must put that banner across our hearts, that we hold people equal, and we must hold it more dear when it is more challenged. And certainly it is more challenged now. And so therefore, I am determined, more now than ever, to hold fast to what this nation aspirationally represents and to live it every day for all people.
Well said. Eddie, I'll call you in. Your dream?
Wow. You know, I would say it is easy to have courage in hindsight or to glorify troublemakers after they are gone, right? We see it whether it is Muhammad Ali or these other sort of historic figures, right? I dream of a place where there are no more Pyrrhic victories. Like we have some wins, but it is at too great of a cost. Someone shouldn't have to be murdered. We have to burn down businesses, have sit in and protest just to say, have criminal accountability around police brutality. So I would say one that's filled with racial equity and hope and not broken promises and pain. And I know this seems insurmountable, but I think about the fact that we had a Klan that was embedded into every government, policing, you name it, and it was defeated. We had cigarettes, which seemed so powerful and insurmountable, it was defeated. And I think I dream of a place where we won't have to worry. I think about worrying as a incredible misuse of imagination. So I used to be a for-profit guy. I worked in private equity, and I always say I wish that I had the imagination to think of something like Uber. I lived in a community that was not safe. I didn't have the moral imagination to think someone can pick you up, right, and create a company after that. So we need to create a place that is safe, a place where we can love and respect people and believe that they have dignity without having to canonize them as perfect, whether that's someone who is stealing, who ends up dead by the police, or a sex worker who is assaulted, right? A place where I walk, whether it's in Kenwood or Avondale, where I don't hear the thunk, 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 the car doors lock when I walk across the street. And, I think I talked to my old great uncle who lives in the South. who has another relative who was lynched, and he is hopeful right now. And I think there is great providence in this moment right now. 2020 is a defining moment for all of us. When we look back 20 years from now and say, what did I do in this moment and at that time? So there's incredible energy. I think there's a collection of will and people who want to create a world that is better than something that we've lived in over the past 100 years. So I'm still hopeful.
Thank you, Eddie. Carl. You'll need to unmute, Carl, to give us your last statement on your dream.
Sorry about that. I suppose my dream, it's usually after great pain, that there's sometimes some freedom to make some new choices, maybe appreciate some things we've taken for granted, some basic freedoms. So I think my dream is that this really serves us, that it's an ongoing moment. It's a 400-year and more than that moment. And it's also some things which have really come to light in this particular year that I think have really raised awareness for some people that haven't been as connected. And I think my dream is that this serves. It serves to draw us together, to help us, each of us, including and particularly people like me, who look like me, or in positions like me, to see ourselves in others, to see them in us, and to see that we are all in this together. That we were. It's a privilege to be alive with these people on this journey, and that we really see this as a coming together moment, and we make some change, and we use that pain to serve, so that it can end, and so that the people we care about and those in our family and friends and communities and loved ones don't have to continue with it. And that's my hope.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you, everyone, for your thought capital, your leadership actions, and your servant leadership. I'll now welcome in Tom Hankinson, who's going to close us out. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all so much for that discussion. Stephanie, you made it plain. Equity and financial freedom are at the center of empowering survivors and working against oppression. Eddie, you spoke right into my heart when you said you can be imperfect like me and still use your social capital to make change. Everybody, I'm Tom Hankinson, pronouns he, him, his, current board chair of Women Helping Women. In this tempest, it's easy to slip into thinking that others can gain only from our loss, a scarcity mindset. Some systems and people are trying to drive that. That's not how it works. We gain by helping each other. It can be scary right now because our lives are less certain. It can be hard to know we're supporting the right thing in the right way. I most want to say this right now. It feels really, really good to support Women Helping Women in the way that they are asking today. So please text to give, find what you feel safe and joyous giving. I'll give you an example of what this drives. In 2021, we will no longer have the ability to give financial assistance to survivors in connection with their safety plan. Stephanie mentioned this assistance. It can look like a $15 ride share or a meal for their children while they're working out a safe place to go. It's money that each of us would give if we encountered that survivor on that night. It's money that in a sane world with stable VOCA funding and a renewed VAWA, Women Helping Women would have for our survivors. But right now, that's not true of our world. And so your $87 for 87 weeks of VAWA non-renewal can directly power making an immediate difference in survivor safety and dignity. That's just an example. You've heard some others today. We're always happy to tell you more. Get in touch, connect us to someone, use your social capital, someone else in your network who would love our mission. I want to thank our sponsors. You make this possible. And I want to thank our speakers. It was amazing, educational. Thank you all who are attending for coming today. We appreciate it so much.